very long because it's more important that we hear from the two people that I'm going to bring up on stage. But just to very quickly set the scene, I am Bendy. I work for the ATOM Accelerator DAO, which was funded via Prop 95 on the Cosmos Hub, and we exist to drive value to ATOM. Probably the single biggest thing that we thought needed to be addressed, and the reason why it was our sole RFP this year, was the tokenomics around ATOM. We went out and tried to recruit teams that would be able to tackle this, and we appointed 3 teams. One of those is Blockworks Research. So you'll have heard from David, or Effort Capital, as he goes by on Twitter. You'll have heard from him day one. He gave his talk. And then the 2 other teams who I'd like you to welcome to the stage now are Noam Cohen from Binary Builders and Chris Berg from RMIT. Great, and now I can sit down, and I will try to shut up because, as one of my favorite Twitter trolls told me, all I do is talk. So, I guess the first thing that would be a sort of good starting point for everyone, I guess, is in terms of what your work is at the moment, what you've been kind of asked to do, if you could give a really kind of top-level thing. I know this is a research project, there's an awful lot of depth, but if we could just have kind of high-level stuff. And Noam, if you could also kind of just give a little précis of what Blockworks Research are working on as well.
Right, I'll start with Blockworks. So what they're working on is, in my mind, sort of like the inflow of money, or like the generation of revenue, or the budget on the Cosmos Hub. So specifically, it's monetary and fiscal policy, inflation number, various taxes that can be applied in the Cosmos ecosystem, or the Cosmos, the AEZ. And what we're working on is more on the sort of like the outflow of the budget, meaning how can we spend money more effectively, more efficiently, in order to like create a better environment where meaningful products can be built in order to drive revenue. I can get into the specifics, but maybe we'll catch
we'll come back
exactly.
to the specifics. But yeah, Chris.
Yeah, so I'm from RMIT University in Melbourne. What we're doing is trying to understand, or trying to build out a framework by which we can have relationships with consumer chains that make money for the hub and make money for the consumer chains as well. And our basic thesis is that ATOM, or the Cosmos Hub, has one particular business model. It is to provide security for for consumer chains. Ideally, there will be very many of those as chains on board. And we're designing basically pricing models and approaches by which it returns value both to delegators and make sure that the validator economics actually functions as well.
Great, thank you. So pretty lightweight stuff. I'm sure we can cover all of this in the remaining 16 minutes. I'm sure it'll all be fine. But I think one of the things that's really important to know is that this is a modular approach, so that there isn't going to be one proposal that says, this is everything that needs to happen for ATOM to fix its tokenomics, do you vote yes or no? This is at the moment in a kind of research phase, and we'll probably come back to that, but the modular element, I think, is really important. So again, kind of a little bit more depth, but kind of the modules that you are working on. Again, if we could start with Noam.
Yeah, sure. I think the one to start with, probably the ATOM alignment treasury. This is generally, we looked at some of the current situations that are out there. So like the recent proposal for Stride, they wanted to ask for 450,000 ATOM. Half of that would be liquid staked, and then together that would be pooled on Astroport. This is a liquidity as a service. This helps the AEZ grow. There's a more frictionless environment, economy to sort of like operate within. This is more attractive to users if the app, of course, is good enough. That is the primary requirement. And then the second use case is like Neutron had an airdrop. We want stronger financial alignment, like voting power alignment with Neutron, and so their tokens can be, they're going to go into the community pool, but it's just we can't do anything with it, right? Those tokens represent currently 50% of the voting power on that network, but what can we do with it? Not really anything. So the ATOM Alignment Treasury is really like a vehicle that sits within the community pool that is the infrastructure for us to express our desires to use liquidity as a service and to seek alignment with these other chains and to vote on their networks. The infrastructure is sort of like the ATOM Alignment Treasury, and then there are other parties that will build out sort of like the APIs to interact with the other AEZ protocols directly with the DeFi protocol and the AAT. That's generally it. And then, the two other modules, and I'll just really briefly, we have the developer revenue incentivization program, which is really just about creating an environment where the Cosmos Hub can mature and further decentralize and fund its own development teams and not so be reliant on a singular entity. This is in the process of further decentralization of the network. And to do that effectively and to do that, with the proper incentivization method tools. And then the Stability Reserve Fund is really simple. It's let's save some money aside when Atom's price is doing well. Let's put it aside when the Atom price is doing bad. Let's take that money and use it on all of these costs that we have that are USD-based. So our validators have USD-based costs, and our core developers have USD-based costs. They have fixed cost prices. For them, it's important that the Atom price or whatever money they get doesn't fluctuate too much. So you would just do what an ordinary foundation would do. You set money aside when price is doing well, and then you use that later in a bear market to more effectively spend. That is the summary of what we're designing.
So those are, again, they're separate modules. Obviously, there's elements of if you don't implement one probably makes slightly less sense, but...
You can do all of them independently. It doesn't matter, exactly. So the idea is those will be 3 different proposals, the order of which we'll figure out, and it's just going to be up to the community to okay, we want that, but we don't want this, or we want that, but we want it modified. And we'll have plenty of time to figure out what it all means and how it works.
Amazing. Chris, if you could just run us through the modules you're working on.
Yeah, so we're doing 2 modules, but very early in our research, we realized it's kind of the same thing. So the first module that we're doing is building out those pricing models that are very dependent on the characteristics of the consumer chain. We need to spend a lot of time thinking about those characteristics because the market can change around. We can come up with an agreement to say remit 15% of all transaction fees from the consumer chain to the hub. But if the token price of the consumer chain goes right up, that's a huge windfall for the Cosmos Hub, you would think. But also at the same time, that's going to encourage the consumer chain to think it's wildly overpaying for security, and it's going to try to exit the relationship. On the other hand, if the price goes down, if that 15% suddenly becomes very little, then the validators are going to get very upset because they're spending real dollars to validate a chain that's making them basically no money, and the Cosmos Hub is going to want to get rid of, to end that agreement, end that relationship, discard the consumer chain. This becomes, fundamentally, it's not just a pricing contract question, it's a question about how you govern the relationship in response to unpredictable future events. If the market goes right up, or if the market goes right down, or if a consumer chain fails, very high failure rate in startups in every sector, we need to have some sort of governance around that. So one of the things that we're proposing, and we're going to suggest to the community, is that each individual producer or hub consumer relationship has a governing committee or a DAO that is a space in which renegotiations can occur, as opposed to what we have right now, which is, if anybody's unhappy, it will just be a big take it or leave it debate in the Cosmos Forum, which is exactly what we don't want to see. We want to see a clear space for renegotiating these agreements. Which brings me to the second part, which is spending a lot more time thinking about how we structure the governance of the hub itself, not just the governance of the consumer-producer relationships, but the hub as well, and thinking very precisely about, well, if we've got these DAOs, we've got the Atom Accelerator, are we governing them correctly? Have they got the correct voting rules? Have they got the correct sort of oversight standards and so forth? How do they relate to other sub-DAOs that might exist in the community? Under what circumstance does the sovereign token holders, under what circumstance are they able to veto those sorts of decisions? That's a project that we're in the process of doing, but it's actually quite dependent on really what Binary and Blockworks come up with as well, because they're proposing fundamentally things that need to be governed, and we will be responding to that with proposals of how they can be governed. We use, I'm an economist, I'm not going to talk about the theoretical basis of this, but my colleague Sinclair Davidson in the audience, myself and our team in Melbourne, we've spent a lot of time thinking about the economics of governments and the economics of contract agreements, and we're applying that to these debates.
I think that's a really good point in terms of, I suppose, some of the feedback that we got is people were surprised that there was like governance was considered part of tokenomics, or indeed that kind of how you fund developers was considered in the tokenomics, or how you support validators was considered in the tokenomics, because I think that there is often a discourse where tokenomics is, well, what's the supply? What's the inflation? How do you use the token? And I think, again, that one of the reasons this is a modular approach is that the more you look into tokenomics, the more you realize that it is the token and the activity around it is connected to all these different things. Chris?
Can I just make a point about that? Tokenomics has been, the phrase has been badly defined, maybe it's been abused. The way we think about it is we need to design crypto economies. That's what we're doing. We're designing economic systems, multi-sided markets that produce things that add value, that ultimately will flow down to ideally a token or flow down to the owners or however it's structured. Once you've got the crypto economic design, then we can talk about things like how many tokens are we going to have? What's the issuance rate? Because those questions, while they're very sensitive, and they've been very sensitive really since Satoshi designed a monetary economics for Bitcoin, they don't reflect underlying value. In economics, we often say that money is a veil. It prevents us sometimes from seeing the underlying economic production and value and exchange. But it's that value production and exchange that we want to, that we need to focus on, and focusing on money or focusing on token issuance rate sometimes blinds us to the economic reality.
Thank you, that's a good point. In terms of the sort of where we're at in the process, if you are an avid follower of Cosmos governance, you will have seen a number of posts from Blockworks Research and from Binary, and there's one from RMIT. And these are on the forum, and people are strongly encouraged to go read them, go respond to them. But what's the kind of, sort of, how far along in the journey are we, Noam? And what's the kind of next steps?
Yes, I think we're still relatively in the research stage. I think in my head, at least, the phase one, sort of like the actual on-chain proposal for each of these modules is sort of like mostly there, the draft for that. I think first proposal, we'll have to figure out which one that is, maybe the ATOM alignment treasury, probably somewhere in October, November. Can't really say, of course. I do want to say something that is like a little bit less sort of like high level, but maybe like actually the most important question and the most important topic that we keep hearing about is like, but how is this going to make ATOM any money? How is this going to make the hub any money? I think that's very important that we talk about this. Because actually, and this is going to sound a bit like I'm shooting myself in the foot here, but none of the stuff that we're doing makes the hub money. And I want to make that really clear. Like, this is also not the point of this, right? What we're trying to do is solve for one key problem, which is the founder absence and like the governance failures for us to like create an environment where people can come to the hub and build products that make money. ICS, it was supposed and is this idea where a consumer chain can come to the hub and say, hey, we can make you money and we will rent the security. I think that's a very viable model. But some of that model is just broken the way that we do this. And this is the topic that you guys are addressing. On our end, we're thinking about, how do we create an environment where we can have developers come, build tokenless consumer chains, or build products on or adjacent to the hub. Like, it's a problem that we don't really have any founders in Cosmos anymore, for the Cosmos hub, because founders are the people that drive products. They're the people that actually, think about like, cool, this is what we're going to launch tomorrow. This is what we're going to launch today. I just wanted to say that because I think, it's important to think about the longer picture here, that like we actually have so much, let's call it governmental debt, and we need to clean that up before we can actually thrive as like a decentralized community and environment. But yeah, so the first step of that would be, some on-chain proposals to fix some of these like little things that we can engage in a more productive manner.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point in terms of tempering expectations. I also can imagine the response from some of the community out there that will go, oh, brilliant, the Atom Accelerator DAO has paid to do research into tokenomics that's not going to make us any money. Wonderful, well done, Atom Accelerator DAO. But I think the reality is that cleaning up that kind of structural basis in which people can come and build successful business models, if we don't do that now, all of our businesses are going to fail. I think that ICS as a business right now is probably in that kind of failure camp. I think it is a wonderful piece of technology. I think it has great people working in it. I think there are some amazing teams and some great products, but it isn't currently going to make anyone the money that we want it to make. And this piece of work that these 3 teams are doing kind of clears the groundwork for that. No, go on.
I was just going to say, we need to make it easier for people to build and launch the killer app in the AEZ. That's the setup.
So my big question is, it's a modular approach, and so while perhaps things all, maybe it's the combined response of everything that's the big thing, but if there was one module that you were going to say, this is the one I'm most excited about, this is the one that I fundamentally believe is going to make us the best chance of creating a environment for blockchain businesses to work, which module is that?
I guess for us, it would be the Atom Alignment Treasury. I think, interchain security is like security as a service, and that's nice, but there are other shared security solutions out there. The nice thing is that the Cosmos Hub isn't incredibly neutral anymore. It makes decisions, right? It's like, it is biased towards the success of these consumer chains. So now we can act on that, and we can do protocol on liquidity. We can use that, liquidity as a service. So like coming into the AEZ is now much more attractive because like we can help, with the liquidity and basically make that much more attractive. It's not just a security offering, it's a full suite of things that sort of like benefit the growth of your network.
Brilliant. Chris?
Yeah, look, I'm also going to talk my own book. So I think, I actually don't think that ICS has failed at all. I don't understand. I don't really understand that perspective. I think ICS has product market fit. Our claim is that now that we have product market fit, that there is demand for, we just had a presentation about demand for joining ICS. Now that we have demand for joining ICS, all we're proposing here, again to downplay our own contribution, all we're proposing is let's make sure that now that demand is there, that we are satisfying it in an economically sustainable way. I think that we need to think clearer about how that works, but it's a hell of a product, and it's a hell of a product that I think solves some of the problems that we have in Cosmos more generally about rapid onboarding of the development of new chains and app chains.
It's a nice change for me to be the least obviously optimistic person, so that's unusual. What I was going to sort of ask there then is so the Atom Economic Zone, the AEZ, ICS, I think it's been the hot topic of the conference about what is the AEZ? Is it limited to ICS? Obviously, Osmosis has a proposal in draft on the forum at the moment where they're saying we're in the AEZ. One of the things I would say that the creation of replicated security and ICS has done is created a desire to be connected to Atom again. And again, I feel like the modules that you're doing enable those to be kind of healthy relationships and sustainable ones. Obviously, we're running out of time and there's like no time to get into the modules, but what I'd be really interested in is kind of like top level thoughts on what you want the community to do from here and what they can expect from you in return.
Yeah, I mean, like most of the conversation is happening on Twitter Spaces, the forum, and basically in the online spaces. If you can participate, that's awesome. I understand some of this is quite academical at this stage and maybe complex and hard to swallow. No biggie. What would be great is people would let us know how you want this formatted. If it's like too complex or if you want a TLDR or like, I'm also just curious to like hear how should we present this to everyone, right? And yeah, I think in general, just like DMs are open, reach out. Let's just have an actual conversation and get somewhere.
Yeah, look, and it's the same from us, and this is particularly for us because we're not a engineering technical team, we're an economics technical team, and we really want and are looking for feedback from some of the ideas that we have about what are the challenges to implementation and what are the challenges to business models that exist out there. So we're really looking to encourage community discussion and debate about some of our ideas. We are not the font of all wisdom. We don't think that. I know everybody else doesn't think that either. We're really keen to get feedback from you.
Amazing. I've been told that we've been granted a little bit of extra time to allow for that very community.
Let's talk about the AEZ.
Well, I mean, we can, but I'd be really interested if any members of the community have questions they would like to ask. Appreciate this may not be the forum, where you feel comfortable, but if anyone does, throw up a hand and we'll see if we can get your question. And if there isn't, I will come up with one. Okay, so I will go with the big one. Noam, what's the AEZ?
Fuck me. We had a really cool conversation about this actually on Monday. It was a roundtable. The AEZ is the economic zone, which is not the same as the ATOM secured zone. So some people think, I mean, this is up for debate. Some people say the AEZ is just all the consumer chains in the Cosmos Hub, but that doesn't really make sense. If we want ATOM to be everywhere, and if we want ATOM to be, in demand everywhere, it's important that we have economical alliances with places where we want ATOM to be. I think Osmosis is one of those as well. That recent prop that came up is a very good starting point for this conversation. So in my mind, the AEZ is the entire area where ATOM or the Cosmos Hub has an economical alignment or alliance or agreement with the other party. They are part of the AEZ.
And I'm the same. So I'm an AAZ maxi. The Cosmos vision is not, Cosmos is a couple of parachains. That's never what it's been. The Cosmos vision has always been, it is a complex network of relationships and economic exchanges that is as big as possible. And to define the AEZ as just one particular service provision to a small number of chains it's really cutting us off at the knees, even before it's gotten started.
And I think Ethan spoke really well about this on day one, where he talked about spectrums. So I think that there are relationships that Neutron and Stride currently have that are deeply intimate with ATOM because they share a validator set. And so yes, that is security, but it is also economic, and it is also at some level social. They share a community. And then, then there are other degrees of how you can interact with ATOM.
So the technical term for that is polycentricity. So there's just I'm going to do this. We've got time. The idea of polycentricity is that you've got multiple interacting systems layered on top of each other. Sometimes it's security, sometimes it's where the stable coins go, sometimes it's where shared validator sets are, sometimes there are multiple DAOs that have interrelations. That's a polycentric system, and the AEZ, if it's not that, then, as I say, it's fundamentally underwhelming. We want to bring as much of the entire crypto economy into the AEZ, not just try to protect it. Sorry, AEZ. It's AEZ. I want to be really clear about that.
That's the big debate.
That's the real debate. Like it's Zcash, and I got Zuko to say that's okay. So that's fine. But the AEZ, it has to be big. It has to be polycentric.
Noam, you were...
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm completely with you there. And I think it also doesn't make sense to sort of look from the perspective of AEZ is these consumer chains, and now we have Astroport, and that's a competitor to Osmosis, so let's fight with Osmosis, and they're not part of it. I actually think that the strongest economical, and implicit relationship that exists within Cosmos is the relationship between Osmosis and the Cosmos. That exists within Cosmos is the relationship between Osmosis and the Cosmos Hub. If Osmosis wasn't there, ATOM would have had a very, very hard time onboarding people and etc. If ATOM wasn't there, Osmosis would have had a very hard time with liquidity before stable coins came over and that kind of stuff. And that relationship is so tight. It's kind of strange that we're not sort of looking at it that way. And I think maybe now as the ecosystem matures, there are other partners that we want to partner more strongly with. But I think that relationship between Osmosis and the Hub is actually a really strong one. And I think it's good for us to think about that in the context of that has been part of the AAZ. In fact, I think Osmosis was probably the first entity to be part of the AAZ. It's just let's start thinking about it in that framework. I think it's going to be very helpful.
I think this is why some of the kind of tidying of the tokenomics and the governance around it really matters, because I think I can make a fairly compelling argument for the fact that Osmosis hasn't been part of the AAZ and has acted against the interests of ATOM a number of times. Gravity Dex is a good reminder to anyone. But that's not really the point. The point actually is that we have a thing where we interoperate, we have tokens on different chains. We've designed things to operate in that way, and yet what we have is systems that almost lead to combative approaches. And if we can clarify some of our systems around our tokenomics and our governance and our contracts with each other, then that may help move to a more productive relationship. But just talking about contracts, I wanted to ask you, Chris, the question I asked you the other day, which is, we have kind of, the hub has two contractual relationships, I suppose. One is with Stride, and the other is with Neutron. And I know your job is to make them be good contracts that work for both parties. Where on the spectrum of like terrible to amazing do these contracts currently sit?
So, as you know, I've tried to dodge this question before.
Yeah,
so
I'm making you say it in front of more people on a live stream.
No, look, so I think that's hard to answer. Our argument is that they have one very particular weakness, which that they don't spell out exit conditions. So if either of those chains are successful or fail, it's very unclear about how we will renegotiate to either for them to leave if they're so successful that they want to move on, or to get rid of them if they're so unsuccessful. And it's the failure that I'm certain that they're not going to fail, but as a sort of contract theorist, you have to plan for that failure. And if we're not planning for that failure, then we know exactly what's going to happen, that the validators are going to start getting very upset that they're spending real-world dollars validating something that makes them no money, and they're not going to want to validate on Cosmos generally. And that is a crisis. And I think if I was to rewrite those agreements, which we're definitely not proposing to do, I would just add much clearer exit conditions.
So kind of related to this, there's a huge amount of demand for chains to join the ICS, and I'm calling it the ICS, not AZ or AZ. But would you, like, in terms of the timescales between when your research is kind of done and there are some outputs that would help us have these better things, would you say just carry on onboarding people, or would you say let's be a bit more considered?
No, I think we need to carry on boarding things. I don't want our research to at all slow it down in the slightest. I think I would say to the community, if you're interested on both communities, the Cosmos Hub community and whoever would like to join, if you're interested in onboarding, we're happy to talk to you now. And we can talk you through some of our thinking, and we can make this as best practices as possible before we publish the final document and those sorts of things. So we're really at the disposal of the community to help navigate these questions right now. And you know, really, we don't want to slow anything down.
Yeah.
Let's make this a success as soon as possible.
I think like from a practical perspective though, I think just like politically speaking also, like if a new consumer chain just like, or a candidate comes over and it says like, hey, we're interested, the sentiment right now is just like, oh, we're not making any money, so show us how much money you're making, and if it's enough, we'll take you in, or at least like show us the potential here, and like, and you got about 6 months, and then afterwards we'll cook you. I think that's sort of the sentiment right now, and that's not really great. But I do think that there is something really important here that happens, is that we need to really focus on the product market fit. We really need to focus on being very selective with what we take in. Ideally, I don't think like a new chain with like a completely new novel idea that has no users, no product market fit, should knock on the door and be like, hey, we want to go, you know, become a consumer chain. I think Stride was a really good example of like how that did work, because like we know liquid staking is a huge thing, and we know that has product market fit, and we know they're doing great. So yeah, that's a great candidate for consumer chains. But I think like any new chain that comes up, based on what's happened so far, is like they now feel a much higher sort of like threshold and responsibility to like show the world like, hey, we are capable of delivering. And I think it's really important that, you know, consumer chain candidates find product market fit first. Heck, you don't even need to launch with a token. Just find your users, find your product market fit, and then if you need that security and if you need that, you know, alliance, come over.
I think that's a much better way of articulating what I described at first as the kind of failure of the ICS business model, which is ICS has a huge amount of demand, it has product market fit, it's going to be fantastic, but right now it's not making anyone any money, and that kind of potentially puts the hub off people joining. So I think that was a far more elegant framing of what I
eloquent, but yeah. The question is just like, should we look at it as like, is a consumer chain, is that an investment for 1 year, 2 years to let them like grow and try out, see if they can find product market fit? Or is it like a service offering that we give to, established products that like, maybe they're a roll-up and like now they want to decentralize, and so great, let's go and become an interchain secure chain. Like, I think that's a really good like use case. I think DYDX could have been a consumer chain, so to speak. And I think those are the kind of candidates that we should be targeting.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Chris, please.
There's a really important point there, though. I mean, what you're describing is an economic problem, and we've got economic models that we can design around that. So if there's a problem where it's just very expensive to onboard a new chain to the validators, there's a setup across 100 or plus validators, 100 whatever it is at the moment, validators, then we can price that and we can give lump sum payments, we can subsidize it through.
No, but we need revenue. You can mint tokens, but that's just nothing.
No, I understand, but we can use, so there are models there, right, as well. So we can use community funds if we need to pay the validators because we think it's going to pay off over time. So there is a design space here.
Sure, yeah, we can optimize.
I think David Rodriguez showed a preview of something that's heading to the forum soon around kind of how you can tax validators differently and redistribute stake from those so that validators throughout the set receive a kind of more equitable distribution that would allow them to, I think his maths came out as something like you could have about 10 consumer chains at the current price if we needed to. I'm not saying that we should, but the fact that you can create a redistribution of the funding to enable that may buy us that design space window. I think there's a similar conversation around protocol-owned liquidity that we should be having about, obviously Osmosis are asking for protocol-owned liquidity in quite a large volume at the moment. That may not be impossible, but we should be mindful of what we're trying to do in the framework of where we want to head in the future, and not necessarily stalling, but equally not kind of setting precedents that we don't want to. And there's a kind of little bit of space to navigate while some of this work is concluded.
How are we on time? We're good? We chill? We stop?
We're good to wrap up? Excellent. Well, I would like to thank Chris and Noam for their work thus far. Please reach out to them. Please pester them. Their work will be as good as the community's input makes it. It is far better for the community to have a voice at this stage before we reach a kind of output or proposal stage than it is to become awake to the glaring omission that they've made from your point of view at the point that this hits chain. Let's try to give them as much ammunition as they can to do the right thing, and they in turn will do the best they can to look after us. So thank you, Cosmoverse, and thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.